Hello everyone, welcome back to this little mini series that I'm doing on a fabric embroidered wreath journal. The first video shows the designs that I plan to embroider throughout 2025. I'm roughly aiming for about one a month, but give or take a few days or so will depend on how much life gets in the way. But that first video, as I say, shows the designs that I'm planning to embroider, and it also shows the very first wreath that I have embroidered. The second video shows the design for the wreath that you chose for me to embroider in February. That was an absolutely sweet little design with a beautiful snowdrop in the middle, very pertinent for February, beginning of March time of the year when the snowdrops are coming into bloom in the garden. And this one I've got here is the one that you have chosen for me to embroider throughout this month, March. Absolutely gorgeous little design, acorns and a few little bits of foliage, but these beautiful leaves round the outside. Really excited and really looking forward to making a start on this one. So in a moment I'll be lifting out some beautiful autumnal DMC threads to embroider this with, but before I do that I wanted to show you this design. And this is what I've been embroidering since I finished off the second wreath and before I started this video. Now this wreath I'm planning to use for the front cover of my journal. Just again, a very simple design. I've used some little French knots all the way around the outside in white to give a little bit of delicacy. Then these are just simple lazy daisy stitches, various colours of DMC thread with some French knots clustered in the middle on one or two. And then for my leaves I've used fly stitch, and then for the stems split back stitch. So all very simple. For the word sewing I outlined in split back stitch, and then for the thicker areas I just went in with some satin stitch and my good old French knot for the dot over the eye. And then up here I filled out these blooms with some seed stitch inside the design lines of each flower, and then just went over the top with satin stitch, working out from a single point at the top. So here at the top, just fanning out my stitches as I went and building it up, and this gives quite a nice little domed dimensional effect to each of the blooms up there. For the stems, the green stems, I use split back stitch again, and for the leaves single chain stitch, and then I just did a few random stitches just to fill in some gaps. So there we go. I thought you might be interested in seeing that. I'm just going to cover it over with my spare fabric and put it out of harm's way in a cellophane bag until I'm ready to start creating the cover for my journal. I've just inserted a few quick photographs in case you're interested in seeing the embroidery in a little bit more detail. So going back to this one, let me go away and pull out some nice autumnal threads to embroider this, and let's make a start. Here we go. I've picked out some DMC threads here. I'm thinking nice coppery tones. For the caps on these acorns, I'm going to work in 2 strands of DMC thread and take a single strand from 869 and 420 and go in with French knots and build up a nice little bit of texture on either of those. And then for the actual seed that's set inside the acorn cap, I thought I would use this little one, and this is a 729, and use 2 strands of that and work it in satin stitch. So that's what I'm thinking of for the acorns themselves. And then I've got this little variegated one here. Now I'm not sure, this is not a DMC thread, but it is a stranded cotton, This one is BR27 Pantouffle, and I'm thinking that I will use that variegated stranded cotton on these leaves here. Not sure what colour I'm going to do for the main leaves. Let me make a start on those acorns and these 3 pieces of foliage and see how we get on. So here we are 24 hours later, and as you can see, I've done what I said I was going to do. I've done French knots for the caps on the acorns, and I've done satin stitch for the main acorns themselves, the main seeds. Haven't done this one yet. I'm going to stitch that one on camera with you. I've got my thread there ready to go, and I've done these little ones here, and again I've left one single leaf there, which I'll do in a moment with you, and I've also got the stem. I've got a waist knot at the end of my thread, so I'm just going to do a couple of little stitches. So I just clipped away that waist knot, and I'm going in with my first satin stitch, just smoothing out the threads as I go, before and after generally when I make these stitches. And that's because I'm using 2 strands of DMC thread, and I want them to sit quite nicely against each other. I'm stitching up and underneath the French knots that I created for the cap to give me a nice little overhang. And as you can see, carrying on, smoothing my stitches, working from that central point on either side, but then as I've created a few more stitches, I move off to working, and here I go, working completely on one side and then on the other side. Just taking my time, making sure my stitches are butted up together. So I've almost finished that side, so now I'm just trying to sneak in a couple of extra cheeky little stitches just to round off the edge of the acorn seed. And I do the same on the other side as well when I've got to the end of my shape. And here I am, just putting in those extra little stitches on the other side to finish off my acorn seed. So there we go, that's my little acorn done. I need to just put a little tiny stitch at the end of each one, and I'll do that with a very dark brown or with a black, and I'll do that later on. But let me get on and stitch that leaf for you. Now I've done that in this variegated thread, and I did it with fly stitch, again working in 2 strands of the stranded cotton. So let me separate 2 strands out. So there's one. That's the second one. So going in right at the top of my leaf and coming down about a third of the way when I can get going, coming down about a third of the way with my first stitch, and then going up to the top on the left hand side of that stitch, down on the right hand side, and then coming up at the bottom of that stitch, so creating almost a Y shape, and then going down on the other side of my thread in the hole that I came up, and I just repeat that all the way down. This is quite a narrow leaf, so I'm struggling a little bit to see where I need to place my needle on either side of that first initial stitch, but as I'm working my way down, I'm just going a little bit lower each time. And at the bottom of my leaf I'm just doing a single straight stitch from the stem up to where I finished off my last fly stitch, and there we go. Just weaving into my stitches at the back and snipping it off to secure my thread. Another quick quilter's knot. And now I'm going to move on to the stem that I said I was going to stitch for you. So here we go. Just going into, again, the base of my last fly stitch and just doing stem stitch all the way down this stem. Trying to make my stitches slightly smaller at the top than at the bottom. So there we go everybody, I've finished off doing those little pieces, and because I've got some of this thread left over in my needle, I'm going to go in with some Colonial Knots for these little pieces up here, these little sprays, to tie in the outside wreath with what's going on in the centre here. So I'll do a couple of those and then I'll come back when they're all done. And this one I'm going to just do a little one wrap French knot because I want it to be smaller. There we go. I'm just going to do a couple of little stitches along my my wreath circle, just to take me up to where I want to do my next little cluster. I've finished stitching my Colonial Knot berries all the way around here, as you can see, and I've lifted out this colour 3021 for doing the little tiny stitches at the end of my acorns, and for the oak leaves I've lifted out these three colours, 300, 434 and this one. Sorry, I don't know what colour this one is, but I think it's probably something like 432 or 435. It's the next colour gradient down from this one, as you can see. So with these three colours I'm going to do some long and short stitches for creating these oak leaves. So I'm going to get on and do that, and I'll be back with a little bit of stitching in a moment or two. I've done my first edge with long and short stitch. I haven't quite got the angles right here, so to help myself I've gone in with my Friction marker pen and I've just marked on these leaves here, there and also here, as you can see, just some lines so that I can get the angle right for when I go in and use this dark brown thread on those edges. As you can see, I finished off my first leaf using all three colours of threads, and as I've mentioned, working in long and short stitch. I've done the darker outside edge on my second leaf, which is the one I'm working on here, and I'm just filling in with the second lighter colour. I'll go in on all of these leaves in due course and add some veining, but for now I'm just doing the infill stitches. Just a very quick update on how this is progressing. As you can see, I've finished off my oak leaves and I've done stems down the centre. For those, I did split backstitch in the middle colour of the three colours that I was using for the leaf. And then because it wasn't really standing out enough, I went over with a whipping stitch in this brown here that I did the acorn seeds with. As you can see, I've started doing the leaves round the outside. They've not turned out as goldy as I wanted. I did want a green but with a hint of coppery gold in it. So I mixed these two colours, DMC 3011 and 830, using a single strand of each. But I'm happy enough with how it looks. It gives me a hint of the coppery tones, which is not too bad. For the stitch that I've used, I did exactly the same as I did with these leaves here and did a very closed up fly stitch, and I really like that stitch. It works really well. It gives you a nice shape that you can manipulate as you're stitching to get your leaf shape, and also it's nice and delicate as well. So I've still got quite a few more of those to do, but we're almost finished. The only things I've got left to do once I've finished the leaves are to do the little branches or stems here where I did my little colonial knots, and also to do the black nodules at the end of each of my three acorns. So I'm going to go away now. I'm not stitching these leaves on camera because you saw me do that stitch when I did these little sprigs here, so I'm not going to do that. And as for these little sprigs here, these little stems, I'm just going to do a single strand of DMC thread and split back stitch. I think might do stem stitch, but I think it'll probably be split back stitch. And for these little ends to my acorns, there'll be just a couple of little straight stitches. So I'll come back when this is all finished so that you can have a closer look. And yeah, it's coming along nicely, I think. So here we go, everybody. This is my little finished wreath, and I'm really pleased how this one turned out. As always, I'll put some close-up photos at the end of the video for you to have a look. I was a little bit anxious about doing this one in the main because of the thread painting that I had to do. It's my least favourite stitch, that long and short stitch, and I really struggle at it unless I practice a lot, as I've mentioned. But yeah, I'm quite pleased with how this one has come out. The leaves around the outside, I wanted those to be a little bit more coppery, but that was down to the threads I chose. And talking about threads, I'll try and list in the description box below what threads I've used where I have a DMC number. And the final thing that I need to mention is that I did a single strand of DMC threads for these little sprigs here to connect up those colonial knots, and I did a mixture of straight stitch, but predominantly it was split back stitch, where the stitches were very, very tiny, such as here, these two parallel ones. I did a straight stitch. Sometimes when I did these straight stitches, I just used the single thread. Sometimes I went over it twice depending on how I thought it looked. So as I say, photos at the end, everybody, and I hope you join me for the next little wreath. I'm not quite sure which one we're doing for the next wreath, but I'll have it ready and waiting for the next video. So until then, happy stitching or happy crafting, whatever you're doing, and take care. Bye bye now.